So, I think one of the things, and we're here to talk about education, and I think that the Akron Board of Education had a lot to do to build the trust. I mean, we can go all the way back to the Akron Plan to decommission schools and reassign pupils, where it was proven after a 4-year battle, and Judge Conte said the Akron Plan used race as a factor in closing schools. You can go back, and they did the same exact thing the last 2 years, the same exact thing. And I think that with the stuff that happened, Bookdo and other kinds of things, there's something that has to happen in order for people to feel comfortable and really sitting at the table with the Akron Board of Education, and they got to be honest and sincere about the process. And I think that if deliberative democracy is going to help us find, because they don't want community organizing concept, which is almost like the same thing. And I don't see anybody doing the Saul Alinsky and the National People's Action and all that kind of stuff. But I think that there's a breach, and it's got to be cleared. Because, I mean, 2 and 2 is 4. It's not 5. Right. That's what sometimes they say.
Well, and it sounds, part of what I heard you saying there is that, and sometimes history has to be dealt with. You know, no matter how recent or not or far ago. I mean, if there's things that have happened in the past that really shape people's willingness to participate in the present day, then you can't simply ignore that stuff and pretend it didn't happen. You've got to have some kind of process with which people can kind of grapple with it and kind of talk about their different perspectives on it, and kind of not necessarily put it entirely to bed, but at least get enough beyond it that they can actually both rebuild the trust and also have enough of an understanding of the community today that they can kind of move forward. And I think that's happened in lots of in places. Go ahead.
Maybe you could give some advice on this. How can you mentioned the size of a food bank. How can you get community organizations that come outside of their box to come at a mass of people to address one issue, one critical issue that may be in the community?
Mm-hmm. Well, how can you get them in?
When you mentioned up there, you said the size of the group matters.
Okay,
so in other words, I'm saying if more people come together to address an issue that's in the community,
right?
Okay, that I say, will not come out the box in terms of bringing different resources or numbers to address an issue in the community. Mm-hmm. Any ideas to help the community to reach that goal?
Well, I'm not sure whether you're asking how to kind of build the critical mass or how to...
how to create a critical mass.
Yeah, so clearly part of this has to be some thinking about what's in it for them. You know, what stake do these different organizations, groupings, you know, whatever you're talking about, what's in it for them? Why do they have a stake in this issue? Why do they have a stake in the community or the success of the schools or whatever it is? I mean, that's part of the thing. And then part of it also then is kind of building the relationships. And sometimes that involves dealing with some of the trust issues or the history issues that, you know, we've kind of already heard about a little bit in order so that people are going to be willing to kind of trust you enough that they're going to be recruiting people in their network to be part of something. Is that kind of, I mean, there's not. I don't think there's an easy answer. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's kind of partly about honing your message, and also it's part about kind of hearing back from people what their reservations are, or what the history is, or what the causes of the mistrust, or all that kind of stuff. So, go ahead.
I think you touched on something on the slide a minute ago about how do you sustain. You know, you have people, all parts of the community, who would do a lot of talk. When it's time to come together to create something and to work on the project, the voices are not there. Or they may show up later on in the process, and then they want to kind of redo the work that's been done. And while we are all concerned and interested and want to do what's right, especially with children,
Yeah.
Because, you know, we're not going to sustain a community without educated
Yeah.
children. So how do you get to that point where you have people that will come to the table, when you invite them to the table, let's start building something, and not wait until it's already built or created,
Right.
and then they want you to undo,
Right.
because that becomes a critical piece
Yeah.
as well.
Well, and that's one of the frustrations with what most communities have, which is not enough of an infrastructure for the people are even aware, they're not connected enough, you know, to neighborhood associations or school councils or whatever, PTAs, whatever might be there as a kind of mediating institution where they can find out about what you're trying to do. You can reach out to them and get them to the table. And so that's part of the problem is they don't come to the table unless you do the kind of monumental recruitment effort that a lot of communities do. I mean, so that's happened. That mountain's getting climbed over and over again. And so by necessity, people are doing that. But it is frustrating and tantalizing to think, gee, why? And in fact, I remember talking to this guy at the Centers for Disease Control who was talking about this vaccine policy issue. And he was asking, how do I kind of recruit people to kind of be part of this kind of policy process? And I was talking about recruitment, all this kind of stuff. And he said, basically, well, I want to go where the people already are. Where are they already there that I can just come in with my question, with my policy, And so that's I think, part of what communities need. And we will talk more about kind of, I think, what some of the ingredients for that might be. But I think you're right. That's the kind of the challenge is getting them early enough into the process and then sustaining their energy, not only through the kind of the first phase, but also the kind of the action stuff. Okay, one more. Yeah. Okay. Oh, there he is. Okay, sorry.
One thing that's been mentioned a lot is trust. I think you mentioned, in a sense, respect. Not based on one's position, but just respect for everyone in the community. Can you give us an example of how communities are coming to address issues where they have developed in the structure the transparency, the accountability, and the tools to develop that respect and trust so that, a work can go forward? Because as has been mentioned, what has happened is there's been times in the community when people have come to the table, expressed their views, been told one thing, and then something else is done, and you can only do that so many times before the community becomes jaded, and you lose it. So can you give us an example of where community is really using these principles?
I mean, I don't know if it'll be helpful to you. Decatur, Georgia, Delray Beach, Florida, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Kuna, Idaho. I mean, there's lots of, you can rattle off lots of places, successes you can point to, and there's lots of them. They're mostly these temporary efforts, though, where the trust gets repaired enough for the people the community can make a decision or come up with a plan or do a bunch of things over a short period of time. But then if that isn't sustained, there's not structures to kind of keep that alive, then I think the trust probably ebbs away kind of over time again. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but in general, kind of all those kinds of places I named and lots of others, I mean, what they did in order to get there were those kinds of those principles that I kind of listed before. So you can kind of track how they did some of these different steps and pieces. But
well, just real quick.
Yeah.
What's unique about our situation is that we're building these schools, we're developing CLC. These are going to be here for generations to come. So we have to have something that can sustain this temporary initiative.
Yeah. Well, let me actually, I kind of go to a different thing here. I'll just give you one example that might be helpful. Because it's one of my favorite stories. It's Delray Beach, Florida. It's a small, the southwest quadrant of Delray Beach, and this part of Delray Beach, Florida, is a pocket of poverty in the midst of the Gold Coast, South Florida. It's been disinvested for decades. It's most of the people, almost all of the kind of people of color and low-income people in Delray Beach live in this one part of the community. And so one of the kind of challenges there was, how do we bring together not only residents but also stakeholders who have some kind of investment in this neighborhood, this set of neighborhoods, to talk about kind of a bunch of issues facing the community. What you see here is fairly typical of some of these kind of really well done engagement efforts, and that you have a real range of things, from very simple kinds of things like people put together a parent support group, youth basketball program, that kind of stuff, all the way up to much more complicated kinds of things. This maintaining the village thing came about because a set of people in one of these small group discussions realized that one of the guys was a contractor, one person did painting, and they were talking about the fact that senior citizens in the community had a hard time maintaining their homes. So they created, out of their idea, basically this thing called Maintaining the Village. They got some funding from a local bank, I think it was, and they got some donated materials from Home Depot, and they actually rehabbed 12 houses in a 12-month period over following this thing. The biggest thing, though, that got everybody's attention was the fact that people in discussions were talking about the fact that there had been a school in this community 30 years before, Carver High School, been closed down as part of desegregation efforts in the 70s. Ironically, then, the kids in this neighborhood were then being bused to 17 different school districts in South Florida, not doing well on test scores and all that kind of stuff. And so this was such a cry and a common theme in some of these conversations. People said, we've got to do something about this. We need a school in our community again. A bunch of committees got set up following this kind of initial engagement effort. They started working with the Palm Beach County School Board. They got some funding from MacArthur Foundation. Basically, 3 years after this thing, this engagement effort, they actually had built this new school, and that's a picture of it. It's called the Village Academy. It's now up to K through 8 or 9, I forget, and it's got, it has many of the aspects that are part of your CLC idea here. It's got a range of community public services being provided in the building. It's got a police substation in the building. It's got a great level of parent involvement. Kids there, their test scores are and everything, other kind of measures of achievement are much higher now. And it's a hub for the community, and I think it's kind of what you want to see out of this kind of stuff. But again, there's a lot of trust that had to be rebuilt there, between this neighborhood and the school board, between people who live there and the cops and the service providers and the teachers, and it had to kind of start out with that phase of why do we care about this place? How long have you lived here? How long have you worked here? All those kinds of questions, and rebuilding things at that level before they get into kind of bigger, better plans. Look, one more, then I just want to go to the movie.
Okay, I'll wait for the mic.
All right.
Yeah, what I was going to say, I think of administrators in the beginning of a process, that they would involve representatives of all the stakeholders instead of people who they select to act as filters for their ideas, then come up with a plan and want you to go along with it and accept what's told you to do.
Yes, that's what not to do. That's right.
That will make a big difference.
Yes, right. I like to think that doesn't work anymore. Well, I think it doesn't work anymore. One way or the other, it doesn't work anymore. But the question of kind of getting people to kind of do something different is different. Okay, this stuff is so dry, and I kind of got sick of talking about all this stuff in this kind of language, so I tried last year to kind of do a little movie, in a very amateurish little movie to kind of illustrate some of these very dry concepts. So this is it, and after we're done, we'll talk about kind of whether you see any of your experience reflected in this movie. All right.